Hello and welcome to the channel, and this little video is really about cleaning out our last and only fish tank. So what everyone doesn't know about me is tropical fish and fish keeping in general were a huge part of my life. I've been keeping fish since a little kid, and I spent my Saturdays on a Saturday job working in a local tropical fish shop, and I then actually went to work there full time as soon as I could leave school, and I left school as soon as I could leave school. Absolutely fish mad. All we've got now is one aquarium. It's a tropical freshwater aquarium, and it's just got pretty easy to keep stuff. It was themed very much like Amazonian, South American theme, and a couple of oddities have crept in and sort of spoiled that. We've got a trio of pineapple swordtails from Central America, and we've even got a Southeast Asian red-tailed black shark, just because it looks pretty recently. But just a general tank that looks nice, easy to keep plants, nothing fussy. I haven't got time for fussy, and lots of time and effort. So we've got LED lighting, we've got Anubias, which thrive in a relatively low light, and these are all little and they're thriving away. We've got Java fern here, which again doesn't need a lot of light, they're thriving away. And we've even got some Java moss, which has come out of nowhere and is gradually growing through the tank. So easy to keep plants. It's all filtered by a large external power filter, which doesn't have any filter floss or fine foam in it, because it's there more as a biological reserve. It's filtering the water, it's giving flow, and it's purifying the water. But I don't have to clean it that often because it hasn't got that fine foam blocking up with sediments and muck. So we're going to use a gravel cleaner to clean the gravel area. And this is what happens. This is the worst thing if you don't keep on top of a fish tank. You get a film of algae growing on the front glass, which of course goes from a beautiful addition to your room to something that looks a bit naff and a bit tacky and dirty. So if you don't keep on top of it, a quick clean, that alone makes the tank look a bit messy. Fish-wise, we've got cardinal tetras, and we've also got rumminose, and we've got a large angelfish, and sadly he's really old now. He's even got a sort of a dodgy eye now, pop eye on one eye, but we'll let him live out his days in there. So let's crack on. First thing we're going to do is take the glass lid off. That also being wet underneath, lighting above, that also grows a green layer of algae, but we'll come back to that. Obviously, first things first, set your work area. Not a lot of room in the corner of our lounge, but put some towels down. You are going to drip water. You are going to make a bit of mess. Secondly, we're just doing a water change, maybe 10% of the water. If you're going to drain any more than that out, or certainly to a certain level, bear in mind your aquarium heater, because if you drain in the water level below the heater element, and that thing switches on, as soon as you put more water in, it'll crack the glass. So any worries, disconnect your electrics if you're worried. We know what's going to go on here, and we know the small water change, we don't need to disconnect anything. So workspace area, let's get in there. So a gravel cleaner. Now when I started keeping fish 40 years ago, we had little air pump driven vacuum cleaners that sucked up the mull and any dirt and sediment that rested on top of the gravel. The great thing about these are they deep clean the gravel if you need them to. So any sediments in there can be sucked up. This is how the easy way to use a gravel cleaner. Suck the end, while that's in the water, you will end up with a mouthful of water. Finger over the end, suck up some water, let gravity drain it through, and once the hose is full, make sure there's no airlock in here, lower that back in. Now the whole pipework is full of water. This of course has to be lower than the aquarium for gravity to take its toll. Thumb off the end and away we go. So because the hose is a lot thinner than the working end, you can't get quite as much suction, and that means the gravel or the sand in your aquarium falls back to where it belongs, but the lightweight muck and mull goes up the spout. Let's see. Not bad at all. You can see it's relatively clean, believe me. You can get a lot of muck out doing this. You can still use your finger over the end if you want to make sure the gravel falls back down. You can see some coming up there. Finger over the end, let the gravel fall out. I'm not going to work too near the roots of the plants because That's food for them there. But you'll find that detritus builds up in various corners or dead spots in your aquarium. You can see, not bad at all, believe me. Sometimes you'll do this and there'll be a huge build-up of mulm in the substrate of your aquarium. We're just going to work our way around. So rather than just change a couple of buckets of water, by doing this, using a gravel cleaner, you're taking muck out of the aquarium, and not just the top water, if you like. It's actually pretty clean in there. Oh, there's a nice bit. Look at that, Georgia. We've got a couple of moss balls in there that kind of roll around and do their own thing. Let that bit of wood back down. And let's just have a poke around this end where we end up. Let's get off that wood. You can see a little bit more muck in there because that's where the aquarium spout is. Rather the filter, inlet rather. So I don't need to take any more sediment out. I'm just going to fill up these 2 buckets of water. Let's get this little guy out of here. If you've got reasonably large fish in a reasonably small aquarium, be careful the first few times you clean them out because they can panic. Often they'll just go in the corner and lie there and kind of think, we'll keep out of the way. But a reasonably large fish, it can panic and hit the glass quite hard. It's not going to break the glass, but it's certainly not going to do its nose any good whatsoever. So, like a lot of other animals, they do actually get accustomed to having their aquarium clean. And you can see what these guys are doing. Just like they would in the wild if a bigger fish was foraging, they're often looking around where the gravel cleaner is, seeing what scraps or any bits of food they can find that's sort of stirred up from the bottom, just like how a lot of fish feed in the wild. A lot of small fish will follow along the side and behind bigger fish, the bottom feeders, to sort of get in on the act of what they're stirring up, those bigger fish stir up. Now of course you don't want to suck your fish up your gravel cleaner. This one's very weak flow, so if you've got your finger over the end of the hose, at least you can prevent that from happening should one stray too close. But with ours, the suction is pretty low, really. So you can see the water level falling. And if you look in there, you can see the kind of flow we've got on the external filter. It's turning over the volume of this tank quite regularly because the spout's now exposed. So constant circulation, feeding those very helpful bacteria living within the filter substrate, helping to perform the nitrate cycle and reduce, really, you're reducing very harmful ammonia in the fish wastes, eventually to less harmful nitrate that the plants can use as food and that we can remove by taking water out of the aquarium and putting fresh water back in. Okay, so we've done that. We're going to take this out. Now, a little tip. Make sure your hose is completely empty of water. If I was to empty it here without straightening it, there's going to be a little bit of water here, like that. And for sure, sooner or later, it's going to end up gushing out that last bit all over the floor of your house. So empty the water first. We'll put this to one side. This water, got sediments in, either it's going in our house, it's going down the outside toilet, but it makes good water, especially during the summer when things are growing, for your garden plants. Definitely recycle it if you can, it'll get used up, and there's nutrients in there for some of your pot plants and your border plants to use up, so recycle it, why not? So of course changing some water makes no difference to the algae that's growing on the front pane of your glass aquarium. If your aquarium is made of plastic, perspex, acrylic, whatever you'd like to call that, you've got a serious problem with algae buildup, and I'll tell you why. Acrylic scratches incredibly easily, but some algae are incredibly stubborn to shift. A glass aquarium, best thing possible is a clean new, not out of your kitchen sink, kitchen sponge scourer. Coarse surface here, it will not at all scratch your glass, and it will clean off any algae at all. But you cannot use this on an acrylic or plastic sided aquarium. You can use the sponge side, but my goodness me, some algae is incredibly tough. Personally, I much prefer a glass aquarium. Let's have a look. Like cleaning your car, you've got to be methodical, or you're going to leave little green triangles everywhere that'll really annoy you later on. If you actually let your fingertips run on the glass, you can feel where algae still is. Now, blokes will know the same thing, because when you have a shave, you feel your face and you think, actually, it feels a bit rough there. It's the same. You can feel it if you can't see it. So you've noticed I haven't cleaned near the lower edge. I'm going to do that last, because if we pick up any of this gravel or sand and it gets between the scourer and the glass, even on a glass aquarium, that gravel will scratch the glass. So we've got to be a bit more careful down here. I'm pressing it tight to the edge so I don't pick anything up as I swirl around, because that is one sure way to scratch the glass, is to rub it with a bit of gravel. Far more abrasive than this sponge scourer could ever be. Have a final look up to the light. Looks pretty good, but annoyingly, you often do miss a bit. And if you leave it, it'll irritate. We've got algae on the leaves here. Not a problem at all, because if you look at the new growth, it's algae free. And we've got little Ottocinclus catfish, and we've got bristlenose catfish in there, which are algae eaters with their sucker mouths. And they come out at night and they work these flat surfaces of the leaves. And for the most part, they keep on top of the algae on the plants themselves. Okay, let's get rid of this water. And let's get some fresh water back in there. A couple of quick tips for you. Now, bearing in mind, this is a tropical fish tank. It's not a sensitive marine aquarium or a reef aquarium, and we haven't got any ultra sensitive fish in here. Pretty generalised community fish that most people start out with. Keep yourself a couple of buckets that you just use for your fish tank. Don't be using them to wax and polish and soap off your van or your car, because there will be residues left in there even if you rinse them out. Equally, make sure you haven't got soap or hand cream on your hands, because you're going to transfer that into the fish tank. When you pour the water in, if you just pour it in, you're going to completely destroy the tank, that force of bucket of water. So use something in there. I tend to just use my hand like this, just to break the fall and cushion the fall. The fall of the water. When you're changing 10%, I'm not too fussed about the water temperature I'm putting back in. It's going to be just slightly warmer to the touch than your aquarium water. If it's excessively cold, you chuck in a couple of buckets of freezing cold water, two things might happen. It might stress your fish, and it could trigger a bout of white spot, because that's the most common disease that they get through stress, even if you've not put any new fish in there for a while. And the other thing that might happen, if you've got things like adult Corydorus catfish, chucking in a couple of buckets of cold water would actually usually trigger their spawning, and that's the one trick to get those kind of fish spawning. They spawn in the flood season, in the rainy season starts, and obviously the rivers and things get an influx of cold runoff water. But for sure, just go for about the same temperature as your aquarium, you'll be fine. Water conditioners and dechlorinator, by all means use them. I never do. If I'm changing a small amount, it makes no difference on these kinds of fish at all. If you're going to put them in a whole tank full, yes, dechlorinate the water for sure. Let me go and top up, because if you see this line where the water's nearly full up, but it's not quite full behind this screening tape here, it looks naff. It's absolutely rubbish. The difference in your aquarium's looks when that water level, the top level is hidden, is completely transformed. It's actually one of those little things that makes your aquarium look much, much better. I'll get some more. If you look in this bucket, you probably think, it's misjudged that, there's too much water. That's because I need some water for something else afterwards. The time it takes to keep an average standard, run-of-the-mill tropical fish aquarium is so minimal, I couldn't recommend them highly enough. There's usually way more to watch here than there is on TV for sure. It's endlessly interesting. You can build up quite a good community of fish. There's only one downside with getting your first aquarium. The biggest downside is there's so many kinds of amazing, fascinating, beautiful fish, and you're going to end up probably with more than one aquarium in your house. My bedroom as a kid, one side was wall-to-wall aquariums. There's lots of fish that don't go with other fish, maybe because they'd eat them. So you end up with another aquarium to buy some of those fish for. Let's finish up topping up. And the water line's gone. It'll look far more transformed, and despite disturbing the water, you can still see just getting rid of that algae on the front glass. Even though it's a little bit cloudy from the disturbance, it looks far, far better. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to roll a couple of the moss balls back where they were so they get a bit more light. Of course, these moss balls, when they came, they were round spheres, because the lakes they live in, they get rolled by the action of these large lakes, of the water movement, the waves, so they're constantly rolling on the lake bed. So as they grow in spheres. But once you get them in your aquarium, over a year or so, they grow in sort of just blob shapes, because they're not getting sort of exposed to that strange action. So we need our scourer, once again. And we need these bits of glass or plastic. If you don't use them on top of your aquarium, you will get better lighting if you've got reef aquariums or you've got really interesting plants that need a lot of lighting, because there's no UV or light loss going through the glass there. But if you don't use them, the evaporation on a heated aquarium into your house is quite big. The water level will drop quite a lot over a few weeks, and it is just purely evaporation. These condensation trays, if you like, they keep them clean. So we're doing two things here, and the reason I've got this water in this bucket is because it's freezing cold and pouring of rain outside. It's forecast snow for tomorrow, and I don't want to go out in the garden and do this. And Mrs. Raptor Exotics at work, so she doesn't know that I'm making a huge mess in our living room. So first off, the top layer, dust, blocks loads of light. And now we're going to go underneath where we've got algal growth. Now we don't have to polish it. This stuff's going to grow back in a few days gradually. It's a never-ending cycle. You can't have an aquarium and not maintain it. It's a little sort of biome, a little ecosystem, but it's not in the wild. It's trapped in a box. So it's down to you to manage that water quality and everything else that goes with it. And that will do just fine. I'll pop that one under. Number two. Downside of glass, you can break glass, can't you? So as a condensation tray, acrylic could be a better option. The downside of glass is it breaks easy and can be sharp. Other than that, it's usually much more preferable in many aquarium situations in many ways. It doesn't discolour like plastic. It's much more difficult to scratch. But you can see just how much algae has built up. It's permanently damp It's getting the best of the lighting because it's just under the lights, and it's nice and warm. So brilliant paradise for algae, which all the time, as it grows, blocks out some of that light from my plants. Yeah, that will do just fine for what it is. If you look under there, you can probably see there's some hatchet fish down here. These guys here, the top swimming fish, they can actually technically kind of fly, like little miniature flying fish. And if there's any cracks in your lid at all, in your splash tray, in your condensation tray, in your glass cover, fish like that will escape from a gap like that. And of course, then they'll fry under your lights and there'll be no more. So close fitting lid for most animals you keep tends to be a good idea. So we've cleaned the gravel. We're not going to clean the filter, that's biological and it doesn't need cleaning yet. We've cleaned the glass. We've filled up with some fresh water, but we've still got a smeary, wet front pane now where we've been working and where my daughter's puppy's nose has been pressed towards the glass. So we need to clean the outside. So all sealed up. Let's get rid of the tools and let's get on and polish up the front glass. The best thing I found for cleaning the outside glass, would you believe it, I know it's a joke, isn't it, is window cleaner. Windoline or generic equivalent. Spray it on a damp patch of the glass and it's going to smear. So a bit of kitchen roll or blue roll. First off, get rid of any drips and splashes that you've created on that front glass, or you're just going to smear everything. And then, aquarium's covered, don't get it inside your aquarium. Don't need much at all. And if you don't clean the outside glass, you're missing a trick and you've kind of wasted half of what you've done. Because when you sit down to admire your aquarium, you'll start to realise there's smears and dog nose prints all over the glass. So, bit of windoline, good scrub down. What we've got to do now is hoover the top there to get any dust off of the light fittings, which anything black like your electrical equipment all seems to attract dust, doesn't it? But there we have it. Fish aren't disturbed. If it's a relatively new aquarium and you've done your first water change or 3, you'll probably find all your fish are hiding under the weeds or the rocks in a bit of panic, thinking you've gone in there to attack them. These guys, they're well used to it. You've got to love a shoal of cardinal tetras, a 1-inch long fish. They live about 10 years. That's ridiculous, isn't it? And can you really get more colour in a tropical freshwater aquarium than a fish that's blood red on its tummy and has the most neon colouring lights all down its side? Definitely better than most TV. There's your box set right there. Hope you've enjoyed this. Like and subscribe. A random video this time. Wait and see what's next.